I never thought my marriage would end with my husband's hands wrapped around my throat. It wasn't in some dark alley or during a drunken fight. No, it happened in our very own living room on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The same living room where we had once unwrapped Christmas gifts with our children. The same couch where he used to hold me close during Sunday football games. That's where he tried to kill me, just to protect another woman. I came home earlier than usual that day. My office had closed early, and I thought I would surprise him with his favorite lemon bars. I parked the car in our driveway, humming to myself, carrying that little bakery box. But when I opened the door, I froze. There he was, my husband John. 55 years old, the man I had built my entire life with, and in his arms pressed against his chest was Cynthia, his young, perfectly polished mistress from work. He was stroking her hair, whispering things I couldn't hear. My lemon bars slipped from my hands, crashing onto the floor, powdered sugar scattering across the carpet like snow. "Mary, it's not what it looks like," he stammered, but his eyes betrayed him. Cynthia didn't even flinch. Instead, she smirked, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Something inside me cracked. I demanded answers, I shouted, and then everything changed. John's face twisted with a rage I had never seen before. He lunged at me, his hands closing around my neck, squeezing tighter and tighter. I gasped, clawing at his wrists, but his grip only tightened. Cynthia just stood there watching like it was a show made for her amusement. My vision blurred. My chest burned. This was how it was going to end. Strangled in the house I had made a home. But then, the front door slammed open. And what I saw next, I will never forget. Before the betrayal, before the suffocating grip of his hands, there was another version of us. A version that still makes my heart ache when I look back. John and I had met in our late 20s at a small church picnic in Dallas. He was tall, confident, with that boyish grin that could melt any woman's defenses. I was cautious, quiet, but something about the way he carried himself made me believe in safety, in partnership, in forever. Within a year, we were married, standing at the altar of that very church, with my brother Michael, smiling proudly in his police uniform, snapping pictures as we exchanged vows. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was ours. We bought a modest 2-story home in the suburbs with beige siding and a little white mailbox I painted myself. I remember planting roses by the porch, John teasing me about how they'd never survive the Texas heat. But they did. Every spring, they bloomed, bright, stubborn, beautiful. Just like I thought our love was. There were nights when John and I stayed up late, talking about dreams. He wanted to expand his construction business. I wanted to make sure our kids would go to college without the crushing weight of loans. We both laughed about growing old together, sitting on rocking chairs, holding hands as the world sped by. Our children grew up in that house, running through the hallways with sticky fingers, laughter echoing against the walls. I can still picture John on the front lawn, teaching our son how to throw a football, while I stood on the porch, holding lemonade and smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. That was our life. Ordinary, imperfect, but full of moments I thought were unbreakable. For decades, I believed I had chosen right, that John was a man who would never betray me. But slowly, without me noticing, those bright roses by the porch began to wilt. And so did he. On the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect American family. People in our neighborhood used to wave at us from their driveways, always commenting on how lucky I was. At church on Sundays, we sat in the second pew from the front, John's arm resting around my shoulders, our children neatly dressed beside us. I would bake casseroles for community gatherings, and John would shake hands laughing loudly as if we were the very definition of marital bliss. Everyone thought we had it all. The steady income from John's construction company, the 2-story suburban home with a freshly mowed lawn, family dinners around a wooden table, complete with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and cornbread. At Thanksgiving, neighbors dropped by with pies, calling us the kind of family America is built on. I smiled, nodded, and carried the weight of keeping that image polished. Even Michael, my brother, believed we were solid. He would stop by in uniform sometimes, joking with John about football or fishing, never suspecting there was a single crack in our foundation. I didn't tell him otherwise. I thought silence was safer. After all, every marriage has struggles, right? Or at least that's what I told myself. But in the quiet moments, when the guests left and the church bells stopped ringing, I could feel the distance growing. John still played the role, but his eyes, they didn't linger on me anymore. His laugh felt rehearsed, his kisses colder. The roses on the porch were still blooming, but inside the walls of that house, something sacred was dying. And yet, to the outside world, nothing seemed wrong. We were untouchable, enviable, the family people looked up to. I kept smiling for photos, baking my casseroles, wearing my Sunday dresses. I thought if I kept the mask on long enough, maybe the cracks would seal themselves. But masks don't heal wounds, they only hide them, and soon, the mask would shatter. The first signs were small, almost invisible if you weren't looking closely. But I was his wife. I noticed. John started coming home later and later. At first he blamed traffic on the interstate, then unexpected meetings at his office. But Dallas traffic doesn't explain the smell of expensive perfume clinging to his jacket or the faint lipstick stains on his collar. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. After all, what kind of wife suspects her husband after 30 years of marriage? His phone became his new shadow. He used to leave it on the counter, unlocked, sometimes forgetting where he put it. Suddenly, it was glued to his hand. If it buzzed, he would rush out of the room to answer it. If I even reached for it by accident, his voice snapped, sharp as a knife. "Don't touch my phone, Mary." That cut deeper than he knew. He also began criticizing me in ways he never had before. My hair, my clothes, the way I cooked. He used to love my pot roast, begging for seconds. One evening, he pushed it aside and muttered, "Too salty." I remember staring at that untouched plate, wondering when his love had turned to contempt. The final straw came one night when I stayed up waiting. It was nearly midnight when he walked through the door, smelling of whiskey and cologne. I asked softly, "Where have you been, John?" His eyes narrowed, cold and distant. "Don't start, Mary, you wouldn't understand." That sentence echoed in my head all night. I wouldn't understand? Understand what? That my husband's heart had wandered? That another woman was taking my place? I wanted to believe I was wrong. I prayed I was wrong, but deep down I already knew, and one night, I decided to find out for sure. It happened on a rainy Thursday night, the kind where thunder rattled the windows and the streets outside glistened with puddles. I was in the kitchen, folding laundry on the counter, when I heard John's voice drifting down the hallway. He was in his office with the door slightly open, speaking low, but the storm must have made him careless. I froze when I heard it. That word. That one word no wife should ever hear her husband say to someone else. "Baby." My stomach dropped. I pressed the towels tighter against my chest, straining to listen. "I'll take care of it," he whispered. "She doesn't suspect a thing. Soon we'll be together the way we want." I remember feeling the blood drain from my face. The man I had built a life with, the man I had defended countless times, was promising another woman a future by erasing me. I leaned closer, heart pounding, every nerve on fire. Then I heard laughter. A woman's laughter. Soft, syrupy, and cruel. Cynthia. I didn't need to see her to know. Her voice had always grated on me at company parties, too sweet to be genuine. I dropped the towels. They hit the floor with a dull thud. John must have heard because the office door creaked and he stepped out, phone still in hand. "Mary," he said sharply, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "Laundry." He looked at me for a long moment, then turned away, shutting the door behind him. I stood there, trembling, listening to the muffled murmur of his betrayal continuing on the other side of that wall. That was the night the first cut went deep. The night I knew I was no longer his partner, but his obstacle. And obstacles he would soon try to remove. After that night, everything between us began to unravel in ways I could no longer hide from myself. John wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. His coldness became a weapon, a daily reminder that I was no longer the woman he cherished, but the obstacle standing between him and his mistress. He stopped coming to the dinner table. I would cook meals like I always had, roast chicken, green beans, cornbread, but instead of sitting with me, he grabbed a plate, retreated to his office, and shut the door. When I asked if he wanted to eat together, he muttered, "Don't nag me, Mary." That word, nag, cut through me like a blade. After 30 years of loyalty, that's what I was reduced to? The criticisms grew sharper. One morning, as I poured his coffee, he looked at me with disgust. "You've let yourself go," he sneered. "Cynthia, she takes care of herself. You should try it sometime." I stood there, holding the coffee pot, my hands trembling so badly I nearly spilled it. My lips wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead I swallowed my words. Because silence, I realized, was sometimes stronger than shouting. His absences became longer, his lies sloppier. He would claim late-night meetings, yet his shirt carried traces of perfume, not mine. I once found a receipt for a dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Dallas, a place we had never been together. My heart twisted when I saw the total. $280. That was no business meeting. The final straw came when he came home drunk, reeking of whiskey, stumbling through the hallway. I tried to help him take off his jacket, but he shoved me aside. "Don't touch me," he growled, collapsing onto the couch. I stood there in the dark, staring at the man I no longer recognized. I knew then, the cracks had become canyons, and soon I would see the face of the woman he was destroying me for. I had managed to avoid her for months. I knew about Cynthia, but I never wanted her shadow crossing into my world. Yet life doesn't always give us that choice. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when John insisted I come with him to his office for a company gathering. I didn't want to go, but refusing would have meant another fight, and I was too tired to fight. So I dressed carefully, put on a pale blue blouse, and forced a smile as we walked into the building. And there she was, Cynthia. She looked younger than me, of course. Perfectly styled hair, a fitted dress that showed every curve, and a smile that seemed to light up the room. People swarmed around her as if she were the star, while I, the wife of the man who owned the company, stood invisible in the corner. John introduced us casually. "Mary, this is Cynthia. She's been helping me with some projects." Helping him, yes, I knew exactly what kind of help he meant. Cynthia extended her hand, her nails painted crimson. "It's so lovely to finally meet you," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. I shook her hand and she leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "You can't compete with me. He'll leave you eventually. Just accept it." My body froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. I pulled back, forcing myself not to react. Around us, people kept laughing, sipping wine, unaware of the poison being whispered into my soul. I wanted to slap her, to scream, to drag John out by his collar and demand the truth in front of everyone. But instead, I did what I had always done. I stayed silent, my face calm, my smile polite. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is the rope you give your enemies, so they can hang themselves. And Cynthia had just tightened her own knot. After meeting Cynthia, the truth became impossible to ignore. I had spent months convincing myself that maybe it was just an affair, a midlife crisis, something that might pass if I held on long enough. But then, one afternoon, while sorting through bills, I uncovered the kind of evidence that shattered every illusion I had left. I was balancing our checkbook like I had done for years. John had always let me handle the finances, trusting me to keep things in order. That day, I noticed several large withdrawals from our joint savings account, thousands of dollars, disappearing every month. At first I thought it was for business expenses, but the receipts told another story. A down payment on a luxury condo in uptown Dallas, jewelry from Tiffany's, spa packages at a resort I had never even heard of, all in John's name, but every item screamed of Cynthia. My hands shook as I read the line items, one after another, realizing he wasn't just cheating on me. He was using me, draining the life we built together to bankroll his fantasy with her. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult, any affair. I had worked late nights, clipped coupons, saved every dollar so we could send our kids to college debt-free, and here he was, throwing away decades of sacrifice for a woman who smirked at me like I was nothing. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the bills. The silence of the house felt heavier than ever. I could hear John laughing faintly on the phone in the other room, his voice soft and sweet in ways it hadn't been with me in years. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry, furious, determined, because love could forgive. But theft, betrayal, and humiliation, those demanded something else entirely. And I knew then my silence would not last forever. When the walls of my home became too heavy with secrets and lies, I found myself retreating to the only place that had ever given me peace: our small church at the edge of town. It was late evening, the kind of quiet hour when even the stained glass windows seemed to breathe in silence. I slipped into a pew near the back, the familiar scent of old wood and candle wax wrapping around me like a blanket. For years, this had been the place where John and I knelt together, side by side, praying for our children, our future, our health. Now I sat there alone, my hands trembling as I tried to fold them in prayer. But no words came out. Only tears. I wept silently, shoulders shaking, muffling the sound so the janitor sweeping near the altar wouldn't hear me. It wasn't just grief. It was humiliation, the kind that eats at your soul. To know the man I had trusted with every part of me had chosen someone else. And worse, that he was using the life I had built with him to fuel it. I wanted to scream at God, to demand why, after all my years of loyalty and faith, I was left discarded like yesterday's news. But instead I whispered, "Give me strength. Please give me strength." That night in the church, something strange happened. I felt a calm settle over me, not because the pain was gone, no, the pain was sharper than ever, but because I realized I wasn't powerless. Silence didn't mean weakness. Silence could mean waiting, observing, gathering strength. As I wiped my tears and looked up at the cross, I made myself a quiet promise. I would not be destroyed by this. I would endure, I would prepare, and when the time was right, they would see just how strong silence could be. After that night in the church, I knew my silence had to change form. Not screaming, not begging, but strategy. If John and Cynthia thought I was weak, they were about to learn that silence can be a weapon. I started small. Late at night, while John was in the shower, I quietly checked his phone. He was careless. Texts filled the screen. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." "She has no idea." And worse, pictures. Cynthia in hotel rooms, her smile smug, her lips painted the same crimson that once taunted me in person. I took screenshots and sent them to my private email, creating a folder labeled "Only Truth." Next came the finances. I pulled bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents. Every hidden expense told a story. Luxury dinners, weekends away, even payments toward that uptown condo. Each receipt became a piece of the puzzle, proof that he was stealing not just my trust but our future. I stored copies in a safe deposit box Michael had once helped me open years ago, a box John knew nothing about. I even began recording conversations. A tiny voice recorder slipped easily into my purse. When John ranted about me being a burden, about how Cynthia understood him better, I stayed quiet, nodding as if I agreed. But inside, I was smiling. Every cruel word was another nail in his coffin. The hardest part was pretending. Sitting at the dinner table with him, forcing myself to look at his face without letting the hatred burn through my eyes. He thought I was defeated. But in reality, I was building my case, piece by piece, brick by brick. And as my folder of evidence grew thicker, so did my resolve. I wasn't planning revenge out of anger. I was planning justice out of survival. Because soon, the day would come when John and Cynthia's lies would no longer be whispers in the dark. They would be evidence in the light. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, but ordinary no longer existed in my house. I had just finished cleaning the kitchen when I heard raised voices coming from John's office. At first, I thought he was on the phone again, but then I realized Cynthia was there. Inside my home. I crept closer, my heart pounding. Through the crack of the door, I saw them. Cynthia stood in her high heels, arms crossed, her tone sharp and demanding. John paced the room like a cornered animal. "I'm tired of waiting," Cynthia snapped. "You told me you'd leave her months ago. Do it now, John. Choose me, or I'm gone." My breath caught in my throat. She wasn't just a mistress anymore. She was giving him an ultimatum. John's voice was low, but the fury in it made my skin crawl. "You don't understand, Cynthia. The house, the accounts, the business, they're all tied to her. If I leave now, I lose everything." Cynthia stepped closer, her red lips curling into a cruel smile. "Then get rid of her, one way or another." The words sliced through me like a knife. My knees nearly gave out, but I clung to the wall, forcing myself silent. John slammed his fist against the desk. "Don't you dare tell me what to do." His face was red, his breathing heavy. And then, as if a switch flipped, his eyes darkened with something terrifying. "But maybe you're right. Maybe she is the problem. I stumbled backward, my hand covering my mouth to keep from crying out. The air in the house felt poisoned, thick with danger. That night, for the first time, I truly believed my husband might kill me, and I had no idea how close that belief would come to reality. It happened faster than I could process. One moment, I was backing away from the office door, praying neither of them had seen me. The next, John stormed out, his face twisted with rage I had never witnessed in 30 years of marriage. His eyes locked on me like I was the enemy. "You were listening, weren't you?" His voice was low, almost a growl. Before I could answer, his hand shot forward, shoving me against the wall. "John, stop!" I gasped, but the plea only seemed to ignite him. His fingers clamped around my throat, squeezing with terrifying strength. The world narrowed instantly. My back hit the drywall, my legs trembling as I clawed at his wrists. I couldn't breathe. The man who once promised to protect me was now stealing the very breath from my lungs. Behind him, Cynthia stood frozen at first, then her expression shifted. Not horror, not guilt, but satisfaction. Her lips curled, almost a smirk, as if this was exactly what she had wanted all along. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My chest burned. My vision blurred at the edges. The pounding in my ears was deafening, drowning out everything but the primal fear that this was it. This was how my life would end, strangled by the man I had once called my soulmate. Images flashed through my mind, my children's laughter, my brother Michael's smile, the roses blooming by the porch. I wasn't ready to leave it all behind. Not like this. My nails dug into John's arms, desperate, fighting. But his grip only tightened. The room spun, the air disappeared, and darkness crept closer. And just as my body was about to give out, the front door slammed open with a thunderous crack. A voice I knew better than my own rang out, commanding fierce, "John, let her go. Now!" It was Michael, my brother, my lifeline, and everything changed in that instant. The sound of the door crashing open was like thunder shaking the house. John's grip faltered for just a second, enough for me to gasp a shallow breath. My blurred vision cleared just enough to see the figure standing in the doorway. Michael, my brother, my protector. His police uniform still on, his service weapon aimed directly at John. "Let her go, John!" Michael's voice boomed with authority, sharp and steady. "Now!" John froze, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temple. His hand still hovered near my neck, trembling between rage and fear. Cynthia shrieked, stumbling backward, her act of innocence beginning before anyone accused her of a thing. "Michael? This isn't what it looks like," John stammered, his voice desperate, cracking. Michael's finger tightened on the trigger. I said, "Let go." Slowly, John's hand's glare toward me was filled with venom. I collapsed against the wall, clutching my throat. Every breath a burning reminder of how close I'd come to losing it all. Michael stepped forward, his gun unwavering. "Mary, are you okay?" he asked, his eyes flicking to me for a split second before locking back on John. I nodded weakly, though tears streamed down my face. My voice was a whisper. He tried to kill me." Cynthia dropped to her knees, sobbing dramatically. I begged him to stop. I told him this was wrong, she cried, her mascara smudging as she pressed her hands together like a desperate child. But her act didn't fool me. I had seen the satisfaction in her eyes moments earlier. John's face twisted, caught between fury and shame. He raised his palms slowly, but his words were venomous. "She's lying. Mary's exaggerating. Cynthia, tell them." But for the first time, Cynthia's eyes shifted. Her loyalty cracked, and I realized in that moment the real unraveling was only just beginning. Michael didn't lower his weapon. His eyes stayed locked on John, every muscle in his body tense. But his voice was steady, measured. The voice of a man who had spent decades facing liars and criminals. "John, I've been watching you," Michael said coldly. "You think you're clever? Hiding hotel receipts, draining accounts, sneaking around town like no one would notice? You've been sloppy, and I have every piece of evidence I need." John's face drained of color. His eyes flicked toward Cynthia, who suddenly looked pale herself. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folder, tossing it onto the coffee table between us. The papers spilled out. Photographs, bank statements, transcripts of phone calls. I recognized some of them immediately. They were the same documents I had gathered in secret. My brother had been building his own case. "You see," Michael continued, "I don't just protect the streets of Dallas. I protect my family, and I wasn't about to let you destroy my sister's life without stepping in. John's voice cracked, desperate now. This is insane. You set me up. Michael's jaw tightened. No, John. You set yourself up. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every promise to this woman. He pointed at Cynthia, who flinched. You wrote your own downfall. Cynthia's tears dried instantly. She straightened her back, her tone shifting from victim to survivor. I didn't know about the money. He told me he was divorcing her, that it was already over. He lied to me, too. I almost laughed at the audacity. Minutes ago, she had whispered triumph into my ear. Now she was ready to toss him to the wolves to save herself. John looked between us, panic spreading across his face. The mask he had worn for decades was slipping, and for the first time, everyone could see the truth. And the truth was ugly. Cynthia's transformation was almost theatrical. One moment she was weeping on the floor, mascara running, clutching her chest like a helpless damsel. The next she straightened her spine, her tears evaporating as quickly as they had fallen. Her voice sharpened, no longer pleading but cutting, ready to slice John into pieces if it meant saving herself. John lied to me, she announced, her tone carrying the weight of a rehearsed confession. He told me he was divorcing Mary, that they were practically done. He promised me a future, but he never said he was stealing money to fund it. I would never be part of that. I almost choked on the bitterness of her words. Just hours earlier, she had whispered into my ear, "You can't compete with me." And now here she was, playing the victim, painting herself as another casualty of John's deceit. John's face twisted with fury. "Don't you dare turn this on me," he shouted, pointing at her. "You begged me to leave Mary. You pushed me. You said you couldn't wait." Cynthia's eyes flashed, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she clasped her hands together and looked directly at Michael, as though he were her savior. "Officer, I swear, I never wanted this. I told him it was wrong. He's dangerous. You saw what he did to Mary tonight. Imagine what else he's capable of." Michael didn't lower his gun. His expression stayed unreadable, though I could see the disgust in his eyes. John sputtered, desperate now, his carefully built image collapsing around him. "She's lying. She's doing this to protect herself." For the first time in decades, I saw my husband cornered. Not by me, not by circumstance, but by the very woman he had sacrificed everything for. Cynthia's betrayal was complete, and John finally understood what I had known all along. Loyalty built on lies will always crumble. And in that moment I realized, the mistress wasn't my enemy anymore. She was his executioner. The living room that once held family Christmases, birthday parties, and quiet Sunday mornings became the stage for John's downfall. The sirens outside grew louder, red and blue lights flashing against the windows. Within moments, 2 more officers stormed through the door, weapons drawn, their boots pounding against the hardwood floor. Michael didn't move his gun from John. "Take him," he ordered, his voice firm, unshakable. John's face twisted in disbelief. "Wait, this is my house. You can't do this to me." His voice cracked, desperation clawing at the edges. But the officers ignored his protests, grabbing his arms and forcing them behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed through the room. For a split second, I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me. It was the sound of justice, the sound of truth finally breaking free. Cynthia stood in the corner, her hands folded neatly now, her crocodile tears gone. She watched silently as the man who had promised her the world was dragged down like a common criminal. For once, she didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply stepped back, letting the collapse unfold. "Mary, say something," John shouted as the officers pulled him toward the door. "Tell them this isn't true. Tell them you still love me." I looked at him, really looked at him, the man I had once promised forever to. His eyes, wild and pleading, searched mine for the loyalty he had thrown away. And all I felt was emptiness. My voice was calm, steady, sharper than any scream. "You tried to kill me, John. You already ended this marriage. Now the law will finish what you started." The door slammed behind him as they led him into the night, and for the first time in years, I finally felt free to breathe. The courtroom was nothing like my living room, yet it carried the same suffocating weight of judgment. Polished wood benches, the smell of old paper and coffee lingering in the air, the faint hum of whispered gossip from townspeople who had shown up just to see the spectacle. John, once the proud man everyone admired, now sat at the defendant's table in a wrinkled suit, his wrists free of handcuffs but chained by shame. I sat across the aisle with Michael by my side, steady as ever, his hand resting reassuringly on mine. The prosecutor shuffled through stacks of evidence, photographs, receipts, bank statements, the same damning proof I had quietly collected, now laid out for the world to see. And then came the moment that sealed it. Cynthia took the stand. She walked confidently, her heels clicking against the floor, but her face carried the mask of a betrayed woman. She swore under oath that John had manipulated her, lied to her, and yes, assaulted me to keep his double life intact. Her words dripped with rehearsed innocence, but the damage to John was real. The jury watched closely as the prosecutor replayed recordings of John's voice, his venom toward me captured on tape. Every cruel insult, every plan whispered in the dark, filled the room like poison. When my turn came, I rose slowly, my throat dry but my resolve firm. I told them everything, the late nights, the lies, the hands around my neck. My voice didn't crack, my tears didn't fall. I wanted the jury to see strength, not pity. By the time closing arguments ended, the air was thick with inevitability. The man once seen as a pillar of the community was now exposed as a liar, a thief, and nearly a murderer. Justice was no longer a dream, it was within reach. The jury filed back into the courtroom after only 3 hours of deliberation. I held my breath as the foreman stood, a slip of paper in his hands. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the entire room could hear it. We, the jury, find the defendant, John Miller, guilty. The word echoed through the chamber like a bell ringing freedom. Guilty. John's head dropped into his hands. His shoulders shook, not from regret, but from the crushing realization that his empire of lies had finally collapsed. Cynthia, seated near the back, avoided his gaze completely, her expression unreadable. The judge's gavel struck. For attempted murder, financial fraud, and domestic abuse, this court sentences you to 15 years in prison. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Some looked shocked. Others nodded, as if justice had finally spoken. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, my chest rising with the first true breath of relief I had taken in years. Michael leaned over, whispering, "It's over now, Mary. You're safe." But safe didn't feel like the right word. It wasn't safety I felt. It was freedom. Freedom from his grip, his lies, his shadow hanging over every part of my life. As the bailiff led John away in cuffs, he turned once, his eyes searching mine for mercy. There was none left to give. He had taken every ounce of love I had and strangled it with his own hands. All that remained was justice. The gavel echoed one final time, and I rose, my steps steady, my head high. For the first time in decades, I was walking into a future that belonged to me. Not to him, not to Cynthia, not to the lies, and in that moment I knew I had survived. After the trial ended and the dust began to settle, my home no longer felt like a battlefield. It became a place of healing. The first Sunday after John's sentencing, my children insisted we gather for dinner. They wanted normalcy, laughter, and love back at the center of our family. So I cooked, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The smell of roasted chicken, garlic bread, and apple pie filled the air. My daughter set the table with my old floral dishes, the ones I had hidden away during those dark months. My son brought over his kids, their tiny voices filling the house with the kind of joy no betrayal could ever silence. Michael arrived last, in his off-duty clothes this time, carrying a bottle of red wine. He kissed my cheek gently. "This is how it should always have been," he whispered. We ate together, the clinking of forks and bursts of laughter, weaving a music I hadn't heard in years. My granddaughter climbed into my lap, sticky with apple pie, and wrapped her little arms around my neck. "Grandma, are you happy now?" she asked with the blunt honesty only a child can have. Tears pricked my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. I kissed her hair and answered truthfully. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm happy now." For so long I had believed my life ended with John's betrayal. But surrounded by family, I realized it was only beginning. The scars on my heart would never vanish, but they were softened by the warmth of those who truly loved me. As the evening drew to a close, Michael raised his glass. "To Mary," he said, his voice full of pride, "for surviving, for fighting back, for showing us all what strength looks like." Everyone cheered, glasses clinking, children giggling. And for the first time in decades, I felt whole again. Looking back now, it almost feels like someone else's story. A husband who tried to strangle his wife, a mistress who turned on him when the walls closed in, a brother with a gun saving the day. It sounds like something from a crime drama. But it wasn't. It was my life. And yet, I survived. There were nights I thought I wouldn't. Nights when silence felt like my only companion, when betrayal weighed so heavy I wondered if I'd ever stand again. But here I am. Standing, breathing, living. Stronger than I ever believed I could be. I learned something through all of this. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is observation. It's patience. It's the gathering of strength until the right moment to act arrives. My silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And when the time came, when the truth finally needed to be spoken, my voice was steady, undeniable. John is gone now, serving his sentence. Cynthia disappeared, chasing another life, leaving him to rot in loneliness. I don't hate them anymore. Hate is a chain, and I've cut mine loose. They destroyed themselves with their choices. That's punishment enough. My life now? It's filled with the laughter of my children, the hugs of my grandchildren, and the unwavering support of friends who never left my side. The roses by the porch are still blooming, stubborn and bright, just like me. To every woman listening, if you are carrying pain in silence, know this. Your silence can be your shield, but it doesn't have to be your prison. Wait, watch. Gather your strength. And when you're ready, speak. The truth has more power than you realize. If you're still here with me now, thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like mine aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that no matter how dark it gets, justice, healing, and strength are always possible. So that's where my story closes, my dear friends. You're still here with me, aren't you? If you've listened this far, it must mean something in my journey has touched your heart in its own way. And maybe that's the real gift of pain, that it connects us, reminds us we're not alone. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." That truth carried me through the darkest nights. Life may throw betrayal, heartbreak, or even danger our way, but healing begins the moment we choose strength over bitterness, clarity over chaos. If this story spoke to you, please like it, share it, and subscribe. Because together we're building not just a channel, but a circle of resilience, wisdom, and hope.